I am here to finish the Twits. This will be our last read aloud. I'm very sad about it, but the year is coming to an end, and we have just a couple days left, so I don't want to start a new book if we're not going to be able to finish it. So, this chapter is called The Ravens Swoop Over. When we left off, they had put all the furniture and the carpet upside down. They had only just finished the job when Roly-Poly Bird came swooping in, screaming, they're coming back, they're coming back. Quickly the birds flew back onto the roof of the house. The monkeys rushed into the cage and stood upside down on one on top of another. A moment later, Mr. and Mrs. Twit came marching into the garden, each carrying a fearsome-looking gun. I'm glad to see those monkeys are still upside down, said Mr. Twit. They're too stupid to do anything else, said Mrs. Twit. Hey, look at all those cheeky birds still up in there on the roof. Let's go inside and load our lovely new guns, and then bang, bang, bird pie for supper. Mr. and Mrs. Twit were about to enter the house. Two black ravens swooped low over their heads. Each bird carried paintbrush in its claw. Each paintbrush was smeared with sticky glue. As the ravens whizzed over, they brushed a streak of sticky glue onto the tops of Mr. and Mrs. Twit's heads. They did it with the highest touch, but even so, the Twits both felt it. What was that? Cried Mrs. Twit. Some beastly bird was dropping its dirty droppings on my head. Oh, mine too, shouted Mr. Twit. I felt it. Don't touch it, cried Mrs. Twit. You'll get it all over your hands. Come inside, we'll wash it off at the stink. The filthy, dirty birds, yelled Mr. Twit. I'll bet they did it on purpose. Just wait till I've loaded up my gun. Mrs. Twit got to the key from under the doormat, where Muggle Wump had carefully replaced it, and into the house they went. There. Okay, next chapter. The Twits turned upside down. What's this? Gasped Mr. Twit as they entered the living room. What's happened? Screamed Mrs. Twit. They stood in the middle of the room looking up at all the furniture. Big tables and the chairs, the sofa, the lamps, the little side tables, the cabinet with bottles of beer in it, the ornaments with the electric heater, the carpet, everything was stuck upside down in the ceiling. The pictures were upside down on the walls, and the floor they were standing on was absolutely bare. What's more, it had been painted while it looked like the ceiling. So here they come in, and everything is upside down. Look, screamed Mrs. Twit. What's on the floor? The floor's up there. There's a ceiling. We are standing on the ceiling. We're upside down, gasped Mr. Twit. We must be upside down. We're standing on the ceiling. Look down at the floor. Oh, help, screamed Mrs. Twit. Help, help, help. I'm beginning to feel giddy. So am I, cried Mr. Twit. I don't like this one little bit. We're upside down. All the blood's going to my head, screamed Mrs. Twit. If we don't do something quickly, I shall die. I know I will. I've got it, cried Mr. Twit. I know what we'll do. We'll stand on our heads, then anyway we'll be right way up. So they stood on their head, and of course, the moment the tops of their heads touched the floor, the sticky glue that the ravens had brushed on a few moments before did its job. They were stuck. They were pinned down, cemented, glue fixed to the floorboards. Through the crack in the door, the monkeys watched. They jumped right out of their cages the moment the Twits had gone inside, and the Roly-Poly Bird watched. All the other birds flew out to catch a glimpse of the extraordinary sight. The monkeys escape. That evening, Muggle Wump and his family went up to the big wood to the top of the hill in the tallest tree, and all built the marvelous treehouse. All the birds, especially the big ones, the crows, the rooks, the magpies, made the nest around the tree house so that nobody could see it from the ground. You can't stay up there forever, you know, the Roly-Poly Bird said. Why not? asked the Muggle Wump. It's a lovely place. It's just you wait till winter comes, the Roly-Poly Bird said. Monkeys don't like cold weather, do they? They most certainly don't, cried Muggle Wump. Are the winters so very cold here? It's snow and ice, said the Roly-Poly Bird. Sometimes it's so cold birds will wake up in the morning and their feet freeze to the bough that he's been roosting on. Then what shall we do? Cried the Muggle-Wump. My family will be in a deep freeze. No, they won't, said the Roly-Poly Bird, because when the first leaves start falling from the trees in autumn, you can fly home to Africa with me. Don't be ridiculous, the Muggle-Wump said. Monkeys can't fly. You can sit on my back, said the Roly-Poly Bird. I shall take you on one at a time. We will travel by Roly-Poly Superjet, and it won't cost you a penny. Here they are, just hanging out, waiting, figuring out what to do. Oh boy, it's our last chapter. The Twits get shrinks. And here in the horrid house, Mr. and Mrs. Twit were still stuck upside down on the floor of the living room. It's all my fault, yelled Mr. Twit, thrashing his legs in the air. You're the one with the ugly old cow who went hopping around shouting, we're upside down, we're upside down. And you're the one who said to stand on our heads, so we thought the right side was whiskery old warthog, screamed Mrs. Twit. Now we'll never get free. We're stuck here forever. You may be stuck here forever, said Mr. Twit, but not me. I'm going to get away. Mr. Twit wiggled, squirmed, and squiggled, and wormed, and twisted, and turned, and he choggled and churned, but the sticky glue held him to the floor just as tightly as he once held the poor birds on the big dead tree. He was still as upside down as ever, standing on his head. But heads are not made to be stood upon. If you stand on your head for a very long time, a horrid thing happens. This is where Mr. Twit got his bigger shock of all. With as much weight on it from above, his head began to get squashed into his body. Quite soon it was hard, disappearing completely, sunk out of sight, fatty folds and flabby neck. I'm shrinking, burbled Mr. Twit. So am I, cried Mrs. Twit. Help me, save me, call a doctor, yelled Mr. Twit. I'm getting the dreaded shrinks. And so he was. Mr. Twit was getting the dreaded shrinks too, and this time it wasn't fake, it was a real thing. Their heads shrink into their necks, and then their necks began shrinking into their bodies, and their bodies began shrinking into their legs, and the legs began shrinking into their feet. And 1 week later, on a nice sunny afternoon, a man called Fred came around read the gas meter. When nobody answered the door, Fred peeped inside the house, and there he saw on the floor, living room, 2 bundles of old cloths, 2 pairs of shoes, a walking stick, and nothing more left in this world of Mr. and Mrs. Twit. Everyone, including Fred, shouted, "Hooray!" And there they are. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed reading all of these Roald Dahl books with you. I hope you enjoyed them. I know next year I think some of these are going to be turned into movies on Netflix. So you should be on the lookout for that. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. I miss you. Mwah.